इसका नाम संगम रखा गया है, तो इसलिए ये तो इसका हमारा मेल होना चाहिए ना, तो ये आपको बताएंगे. For those who didn't understand, I said this is the Sangam, which is the meeting of so many elements. Some, like the Sangam, hidden, like the river Saraswati. Saraswati, the sacred river, where the three rivers meet. So the sacred Ganga and Jamuna and the hidden Saraswati. And that is considered the most powerful meeting place, the Sangam. And the beauty of Hastashilp, the hand craft, woven by the hand, woven by the mind, woven by the all-seeing eyes, and woven by our tradition and our beliefs, is a very important part of our being. There has been an unending debate in which I have participated amongst the craft practitioners of the Western world and of the traditional societies to which I belong. And they have also discussed about the definition of crafts. And after all these years, it was very fun. Or they are practiced by the people for their personal use and as a part of the ritual associated with the diurnal rhythm. But they can also jump from one craft to the other. I have a very dear friend who is no more, who is a fantastic enamel worker, Panna Lalji of Delhi. Delhi के Panna Lalji मीनाकारी का काम करते थे. Originally, he was not a jeweler. He was a potter. वो कुम्हार थे. तो उन्होंने जो ज्वेलर थे, उन्होंने गोद ले लिया उनको. कैसे पता नहीं, पर मैं जानती हूँ कि हकीकत है, क्योंकि वो मेरे मित्र थे. I'm saying this, that Panna Lalji, he got the National Award, was an enamelist, but he was not a jeweler, because there is a hierarchy in the crafts, and he jumped and became a jeweler came from a potter's background. How he became, we don't know, but he was adopted. And he learned and he became a master. And he was a wonderful human being and a wonderful artisan. So it's not that people did not change professions, they did. So it's not something that is high-bound as such. Anyway, crafts have always had a very, very close association with the rites of passage. Before we are born, we are protected by them. There is the 7-month ceremony in every community. The unborn child, when it becomes 7 months. And in the West, they have the baby shower, which is really receiving gifts and all that. In this case, it is receiving gifts, but it is also, they use a particular textile. In Gujarat, it's the patola. There's another sari in other places, which is worn, specially given by the mother to protect the mother and the unborn child. So before I was born, my mother was wrapped in a shawl which was specially embroidered by her mother, the Pulkari, and a prayer was said for the unborn child. So I came, before I even came into this world, I was wrapped in the love of my grandmother, embroidered onto fresh wool. And till we die, I still remember my mother-in-law had a beautiful pulkari which she had embroidered, and she kept that wrapped in a cloth. And she said to me, "You're the only one who will understand. I have embroidered this, I have kept this to cover me, even though I am a widow and I should not be covered with a colorful cloth, to cover me with my work and my world of color that I had created." And I saw to it that it was done. And had she been not a widow, it would have been done in any case. But what I'm trying to say is, from birth till the end, crafts form a very important part. The potters, they are the creators, and they are known as the creators of the world. Without them, nothing happens. The marriage ceremony cannot take place until the girl's side goes to the Kumar and takes the mud from the cone of his. क्यों जी? शादी नहीं शुरू हो सकती जब तक माटी आपके यहाँ से नहीं ली जाती. सही है ना? He's saying, I am not bullshitting, you know. It's true. And that mud is used to the choke, the mandala, which is created where the marriage takes place, is cleaned and is covered with that particular mud. So the marriage, and every ceremony, the pouring of water, the libations, and finally the last act, poignant to all of us. When the body is cremated, a mud pot is filled with water, and we go on our last journey carrying that body. And that, before the cremation takes place, they break the pot, which is the sign of the end of life. And this brings me to another very interesting, I'm sorry, I've forgotten, I'm a terrible speaker in the sense that I go off the point, but I think you'll enjoy that. The word for the pot, the old word for the pot, is patra in Sanskrit. Patra is that which comes from the word leaf, and signifies the movement of evolution of man from the hunter to the food gatherer. So this is so that leaf container is the first container even before pottery came. मट्टी का बर्तन से पहले पत्ते का जो पात्रम जो बनता था पत्ते का वो पहला था, फिर मट्टी का है. So it was known as patram. Now that got a very interesting connotation. It became a serious part of us. So, the actor is known as Patra. He who takes on the spirit of the character he's portraying. Right? The body is the Patra. It's my Patra in which my spirit is kept. And then, when the soul has flown, then the Patram is destroyed and life ebbs out with the flow of the water. So, in a way, there's a strong ritual, or shall we say spiritual link between the creator and the recipient. And that is the difference between the studio craftsperson and the traditional one. That does not mean that traditions don't change. In fact, they're open to outside influence as they are closely linked with our day-to-day living. So, changing needs, changing demands, different markets have been responsible for a great deal of influence being absorbed into the very frame of social practices. In the case of Australia, the Western concepts have been transplanted to an alien environment. It is the work of the indigenous people which reflects their environment, their way of life and their beliefs, as we saw in the excellent examples which were shown to us by the blurring of frontiers can be seen in the commercial and the ritualistic use of a particular product all over the world. India, for instance, is known as the producer of the patola. And it's known here too as a magical cloth. It's a power cloth. It controls evil, it heals sicknesses, and the same is true in Southeast Asia. Throughout Southeast Asia, patola is a very important part. And I have observed that patola for instance, in many of the islands, thousands of islands of Indonesia, it is a power cloth. If you have a patola, you have the world in your hand. That's what they say. And the patola is owned by the woman. And every time the husband misbehaves, as they have a general tendency to do, she threatens to take her textiles and move away, and he's on the straight and the narrow path. In Bali, in the Bali Aga villages, who are supposed to be connected with Orissa, they weave the double ikat also, and that too is sacred. That whole village, the entire ritual of the village evolves around that particular ikat weaving which they carry out in those particular thing in our village that they do. In fact, in some other cases where they only do the warp ikat, and in Sumba and various other places where it's called checked material. Now, the check is a very powerful. The traditional word for the check is chalk. Two parallel lines running parallel to the earth, and two parallel lines rising from the earth, moving upwards, creates the sacred grid. That is the chalk. And in India, we only wore it for ritual purposes. And often what happens is that when a design or a motif is considered powerful in one culture, it becomes powerful in many cultures and is accepted. The Czech, the chalk, the sacred grid, has so many names, and it's worn for all ritual purposes. The upper cloth is worn throughout Southeast Asia. In Bali and in many other places, you cannot enter the temple without a checked scarf. This was further reiterated, the importance of the check, the chalk, the sacred grid, when Indonesia came under Islamic influence. The square, crown square, was given importance in that. And you won't believe it, it's important in West Asia. And the Rumal-e-Hajj, the rumal that people went on Hajj, on pilgrimage to Mecca, and they came back, was woven in India. Nobody knew it then. And brought back even by our pilgrims and travelled all over. In West Asia, it became a part of their ritual because the check and the cross is much older than the Christian cross. We have the Ogden cross in Africa. We have the chalk that we have by various names in various societies. So what I'm trying to say is that these motifs, which were, and these traditional weaves, which had a significance not only in its original place, but significance all over, and significance in time and space. And the interesting thing is, and it's because of this, until very recently, and when I say recently, I would say before the coming of the British, because in the span of history, this is a small period, though it has affected us greatly. There was no difference between the designer and the creator. They were one. The master Stapati, the caster, bronze caster as we know the Stapati now, was also an architect. He was a caster. He built the temples. He planned cities on the sacred grid. And he also cast. He opened the eye of the image when it was put into the Garbhagriha, the womb of the temple. He opened the eyes, and he believed, and they all believed, that the Spirit of the Lord descended on him. And the Stapati moves back, looking at his creation for the last time, because he cannot come back ever. Because only God is the creator, not man. Now, therefore, with this belief, how can there be a division between the designer and the creator? They were one and the same. But the introduction of the European concept of the design schools, they were introduced to us by the British, and in the West with the industrial institution, because even earlier in the West, the separation did not exist. They were one and the same. And this division, continues even in the West, because in the art colleges, they get an academic degree. In the polytechnics, they get a diploma. There's also a division in the museums. There's the classical art and the decorative art. So the classical art curatorial staff is of a higher hierarchy than the folk art. So a tea set made in the design center based on Greek motifs. A tea set by the original आजमगढ़ के जो कुम्हार थे ना, उनसे बनवाया गया अंग्रेजी tea set. So it's so funny. And the Azamgarh people made the most extraordinary pottery. So have a look at that, and that will give you an idea. But I would say that in the West too, there is a change. No longer they've wiped out the differences. I think, I hope, and maybe contradicted on that, between the minor arts and the major arts. And the craftsperson is a creative person in his own or her own right, who uses the medium with a mastery and transcends its limitations. An exquisite piece of jewelry is a sculpture, but a sculpture which has another dimension. It becomes a part of the wearer. Right, Stupa? So, Topa, we have a jeweler in our midst who does that. The exquisitely designed cloth flows over the human form, creating a rhapsody in movement. Yet, there are only a few who are able to reach these heights. More often than not, we have NIFT here with us, and they will agree with me. The students, even before they have mastered the medium, start experimenting, and their creations fall short of even the simple creations of an artisan who at least knows the materials. A fabric becomes a stiff, meaningless structure. The clay loses its plasticity and looks like metal. Beautiful forms are deformed to look different, and meaningless innovation becomes the order of the day. I've had the punishment of being on the jury of LIFT and seen some of these monstrosities and wept and didn't know whether I should scream at them or I should weep. The world of crafts is at the crossroads, so we need the Sangam, but maybe described in a slightly different way, Karen. And we ask ourselves, in which direction are we progressing? And we come up with many questions. How important is it to attend educational institutions and obtain a doctorate or an academic degree? Asks a Western designer. But for us in the traditional society, where the people who work with hands are looked down upon, it's very important. And I have been fighting to get crafts in the mainstream of education. And performing arts in India are in the mainstream, with the result that performing arts have done wonderfully well. So, what is the question that people of a Western educational background or training or lifestyle are asking is quite different. So, where is the Sangam? Into the psyche of a people, an expression of their natural and cultural environment, and a means to transcend the distortions of rootless society. We need to understand that. Otherwise, we cannot create. I will end by sharing with you, because I had the privilege as a child to live by the side of Gandhiji's. I come from the frontier, the place which has been made famous recently for the wrong reasons, Ahmedabad. Gandhiji came, and this was in 1938. And he stayed in our family house, because my family was part of the independence movement in the frontier, bordering with Afghanistan. And he changed our lives. I think my devotion to crafts is a seed planted by Gandhiji, because everybody gave up wearing imported and started wearing khadi or handlooms. Gandhiji taught himself to spin, and he made it compulsory that those who were part of the freedom movement had to spin. And in the middle of this big movement, you would see Nehru, you would see other stalwarts who couldn't bend their knees because many of them had had Western education, sitting down to spin. For Gandhiji felt that the rhythm of the movement of the hands had a meditative quality which gave strength and a peace of mind with which to fight for our independence. And he created khadi as the livery of the freedom movement, and he created khadi as meaningful. Then, over the years, we were laughing and we said that khadi is not fulfilling the purpose for which it was meant, that it has become a sacred cow. But now people are realizing how important this art which has been kept alive is. And today, khadi is, alhamdulillah, coming into its own. So, here I have tried to share my thoughts with you. Forgive me if I had caused confusion. That was not my intention. But of course, also, it was a bit of my intention, because only when you question can you get the answers. Thank you. This was about 10 years ago, and suddenly one of them was eating with his spoon, and he asked the man, "Hey, why don't you make a spoon with a beautiful handle?" And somebody else said, "Hey, why don't you take off her pin?" And talked about that she knew nothing, and how she went back and she found her origins. And she said there was a border design. Who is the border girl? There was a border design which had a river flowing and the mountains. And it repeated itself. And she said it was a leitmotif. Now, I am a historian, textile historian, as one of my vices, passion. And there's no proof that the Thai who were pushed down from China into Southeast Asia, and then, Thailand and so on and so forth, that they moved up the Mekong River to Tibet. I mean, this is assumption and from oral tradition. And then in Tibet, then they came down the Brahmaputra. The Thai, the Mu, as they were called, or Miao, they always, they lived on the mountains because they were pushed and the river in between. And so that border design became their leitmotif. And from her study, she said, according to them and their family traditions and their old tradition, they came from Tibet. But I was telling her that this indicates that you probably came originally from southern China, driven down and up. And so it was wonderful. And this is only one example. There were